welcome back to my channel, Cook from the Past. I am Catherine, and today I want to have a serious talk with you about eating real food. And what I mean by that is food that are from single ingredients. You put them together and you end up with a delicious and nutritious meal. Now, it's no surprise to anyone that the food that's in our stores now is so highly processed. And the example I'm going to use today is this. Now, I find it really interesting that right here, now this is supposed to be au gratin potatoes, right? And it actually comes right out and says here, made with real sliced potatoes. Who would expect a potato dish to not have real potatoes? That's what the state of our food has come to. They actually have to say that their potato dish has real potatoes. I will argue that, however, I digress. We'll continue on. It also says that it's in a rich, creamy cheese sauce. So I'm going to read these ingredients to you. And at the end of this video, I'm going to be talking about what those ingredients do to your body. So it cost about $1.72. Really hated to have to buy this at the grocery store, but I needed it to show you what is really in this food. And again, I hate to even call this food. So here we go. I'm going to show the ingredients to you first, and then I'm going to read them to you. And I want you to pay attention to this right here. And I want you to pay attention to the food that you're putting in your grocery cart. And again, it's not food. No. All right, I'm going to read this ingredients. Enriched, potatoes, number one ingredient, well, yay. Enriched flour, maltodextrin, do you know what that is? Cornstarch, salt, onion, potassium phosphate. What is that? Modified whey. I know what whey is. That is what is left over when I make yogurt. It's the liquid part of the milk. What they do to modify it, it's anybody's guess. And vegetable oil. And then it goes, and that's what it's, I don't see any cheese in here, do you? Then it goes on to say that it contains 0.5% or less. Garlic, whey, cheddar cheese, there's your cheese, right? Monoglycerides, when is the last time you put that in a dish you were making? Lactic acid, calcium lactate, yeah, I keep that in my cupboard, don't you? Non-fat milk, color, chicken broth. I don't put chicken broth in my au gratin potatoes. Sodium phosphate, do you know what that is? Natural flavor, that could be absolutely anything. It could be a lot of not pretty things. Sodium phosphate, natural flavor, blue cheese, silicon dioxide, buttermilk, pea protein isolate. Yeah, I keep that in my cupboard. Coconut oil, rice flour, and spice. That's what's in this box. And of course, it's in the very small print. Here it says contains bioengineered food ingredients. Folks, that means genetically modified food, which is not food at all. Genetically modified food creates proteins that are allergens, they are inflammatory to the body, and no good comes from GMO products. So I am going to make au gratin potatoes the way they should be made. And here is what I'm going to be using. Real potatoes. This one is an organic Yukon Gold potato from a local farm. Just because I'm in a hurry tonight, I'm going to be using some Italian style shredded cheese. You can shred your own cheese, use any kind of cheese that you want. I'm going to be using a cup or less of this. And last but not least, I'm going to be using a heavy whipping cream. I just mentioned 3 ingredients compared to this. So let's get cooking. And I thought about doing a taste test, but I could never get my husband to eat this. However, here is the story behind this. When my daughter and her 3 teenage daughters were staying with us for about a month, I made au gratin potatoes for dinner one evening, and the girls are just going crazy over this stuff. I mean, they couldn't get enough of it. And they stopped mid-bite after a while, and they looked at their mom and said, "Mom, you've been giving us boxed potatoes, haven't you?" And of course she was shocked by that. Suddenly the jig is up. And she said, "Well, I'm a working mom. I have to take shortcuts." And at that point, the girls were not buying it. And I said, "Girls, next time we have this," which probably happened a few days later, "let's go into the kitchen and I will show you how to make it." It was so easy. The girls, I think, were 12 and 14 at the time, and they found it so easy. Seriously, anybody can make real food, and it doesn't cost that much more. I'm going to do a little bit of a cost analysis here at the end also, just to let you know I can probably make a very healthy au gratin potato dish for the same price as you're paying for garbage. So let's go get cooking. Here we go. These are the potatoes I'm going to be using. I've got 3 Yukon Gold potatoes. I did go ahead and peel them and just gave them a quick rinse off. The reason I peeled them was because they had some of the green on them, and so they got exposed to some light. No big deal. You can peel them and they're perfectly fine. Normally, I would scrub them well and just leave the peel on, the skins on, but we'll just continue on anyway. All right, I am slicing these, I would say about 1/4 inch thick. I'll just do several of those. You want to make sure you have a good sharp knife when you're doing this, because people get hurt more frequently when they try to push too hard because they're using a dull knife. That one's a little thicker, but that's fine. Okay. I have buttered this baking dish. It's a lovely vintage baking dish. Love those things. It just makes the food look so attractive. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and tip this up here so you can see. I'm just going to layer these potatoes. Just kind of overlap as you go, like such. It makes a very pretty dish. Plus it gives them a little bit of room to get all of the cheese and the milk kind of throughout, over, under, and in between. So all right, there we go. 1 potato. The next thing I want to do is just sprinkle a little bit of this cheese. I would say at the very most that was about 2 tablespoons worth of cheese. At this point I would probably also salt and pepper. If you wanted to put a little bit of onion in here or garlic powder, absolutely you can do that. So let's do the next one. I'm going to be 1/4 inch slices. This is so fast. I think you could probably do this in the amount of time that it takes to make that terrible boxed stuff. All right, this is getting a little precarious here, trying to keep that round potato from slipping, so I'm just going to turn it on its side and continue slicing. All right, next layer. Let's do some of these other ones first, the ones that aren't round. We'll make that last layer the pretty layer. There you go. And as you might have guessed, we're going to do another couple tablespoons of this grated cheese. Little salt, little pepper. Let's do our last potato. If you have a mandolin that does nice slices, you can certainly do that too. All right, this one's getting a little, the last slice is going to be a little tricky. Don't want to cut myself. All right, we're good. All right, last layer. There we go. That one's sliding around. Let's put it over there. All right. We're going to make that last layer be the pretty layer. If you have any that are a little bit thicker on one side than the other, put the thicker end over on the outside where the heat is going to be greatest, and it will cook evenly that way. Put that one in the center. There you go, all 3 potatoes. This is probably going to be good for about 6 servings. And yes, a couple more tablespoons of cheese. Little salt, little pepper, and of course, if you're trying to avoid the salt, you don't need to use the salt at all. Okay, here we go. We are ready to do the final touch. So, I'm going to be using heavy whipping cream in my dish. We're not afraid of some fat in our food. You can also use half and half, or you can use milk, whatever type you want. If you can't use the cheese because of dairy issues, you can use some of the vegan cheese. That's fine. It probably isn't going to melt as well. And you can use whatever type of milk that you have found to have the most creamy kind of consistency. For me, I find that it's cashew nut milk. But, and again, use what you want. But this is how we're doing the main dish and replacing that piece of garbage stuff that calls itself food in the box. Now I'm going to be pouring some heavy cream over this. And there's no measurement because I'm watching for when I can see, and I'll show you when I get there, when I can see the milk is starting to kind of accumulate down at the bottom. I'm trying to do this gently so as not to cause too much of that cheese to run off. Okay. I'm going to put this up here in hopes that you can see it, but I can see the cream right there. It has come to where I can see it just below the potatoes, and this will all cook down and be bubbly and absolutely gorgeous. But that's how much milk or cream you want to use. So you can just see it starting to accumulate in there. And now I'm going to be putting it in the oven and just letting it bake. And when it's done, I will be back and you'll see a beautiful, nutritious, real food au gratin potatoes. Here is the very delicious last look at the au gratin potatoes before I serve it up. Welcome back. It was a fine meal that we had with our au gratin potatoes and Brussels sprouts and the meatloaf, that meal. So I did say in the beginning of this video that I was going to talk a little bit about those extra ingredients that were in this. First of all, I want to talk about what is on that slide just before I started talking here. So I did a cost analysis and I found that by making the potato dish, the au gratin potatoes, my way, the cost was $3.45, but that made 6 1-cup servings. And now, first of all, there's nothing organic about this whatsoever. So if I take the cost of non-organic components, so non-organic regular store-bought Yukon Gold potatoes, and using milk instead of the cream, the cost of making this is $1.68, but you still get the 6 servings. Whereas this was $1.72, and it says the per container as prepared, each serving is 2/3 of a cup, and it makes 4.5 servings in the box. So I got to taking a look at how much food that would actually give you by making this, and is it really 4.5 servings? So this is a little 1/3 cup, and it's not much. Right? It's just like the amount that I can hold in my hand, just like a small ball. That is 1/3 of a cup. So 2 of these to the very top would be 1 serving according to this box. That would give you 4 servings. But what about that extra half serving? Unless there's maybe a small child, that would just be 1 of these little 1/3 cup measurements. I mean, it's not much, right? So to say that's 4.5 servings is ridiculous. They're not real life servings. So anyway, you can make a much better product by doing it yourself. You get more and you can do it for less. So that's my rant on that. However, there was also some ingredients in this food that are highly questionable, and I'm just going to talk about some of them. I just have it written down here, and I'm just going to read it to you. So the maltodextrin is a starch that undergoes intense processing. So anytime you hear intense processing, you got to think there's no nutritional value to that whatsoever, and you would be absolutely correct. So maltodextrin is used to replace sugar and improve texture, shelf life, and taste. The glycemic index for maltodextrin, and that's an index that measures how much it spikes the insulin in the body. So the glycemic index for maltodextrin is higher than table sugar. Isn't that interesting? It's like a double whammy, right? It's like sugar, a lot of it in here. Research shows that it may reduce good bacteria and increase the bad bacteria in the gut, which then increases the risk of inflammatory bowel disease. Convenience foods, right? How convenient is inflammatory bowel disease? Not so much. So I also looked at potassium phosphate. So it's a combination of potassium and phosphorus, and it's used as an additive in food to stabilize, thicken, and maintain the pH and moisture in processed foods. It preserves and extends the shelf life. It is particularly problematic for people who have reduced kidney function. I would certainly hope that people who have kidney issues don't eat this. But there's no warning on here, right? There's no warning on here that tells you that there's a problem with some of these ingredients. Okay, now I'm going to go with modified whey. Now, I kind of question that because I know what whey is, and it's a perfectly natural thing. But in processed foods, it's a chemically changed dairy ingredient meant to give food products a creamier texture and taste. But it is also a very unhealthy additive because it has been chemically changed. Next one I'm going to mention is the monoglycerides. So monoglycerides are a single chain fatty acid. It's an emulsifier, which means that it helps bind oil and water together, much like margarine is really just oil and water. It is used to extend the shelf life and the stability of processed foods. It's a highly processed fatty molecule that becomes a trans fat. Now they will say, oh, we didn't add any trans fats in here, but when you highly process a fat, that process turns it into a trans fat. So they're not being honest in the food industry about what they're doing to our food. And by the way, trans fats are extremely inflammatory. They cause inflammation all over the body, but particularly in the blood vessels. That's why doctors are always telling their patients, oh, low fat, low fat, low fat. But the problem is not fat. The problem is the type of fat. And if you are eating inflammatory fats, then you have vascular and heart disease. Lactic acid is one of the ingredients mentioned in here. Lactic acid is fine. It's a normal part of the fermentation process. I have no squabble with lactic acid. So another item that I want to mention is calcium lactate. Now, calcium lactate I have no problem with whatsoever. I actually use that to make low sugar jams and jellies, and it just works to help the jam or gel without a lot of sugar. So you can use it for lower sugar jams and jellies. It's perfectly good ingredient to use. So another one I want to mention is sodium phosphate. It thickens food, it cures meats, it's a leavening agent, balances pH, and it's another emulsifying agent. And it's a combination of salt and phosphate. So it's definitely a no-no for people with kidney disease, intestinal problems, or heart failure. Interestingly, there was some research that showed it may elevate the mortality rates for the general public, as well as for those with kidney or cardiovascular disease. It has a higher potential to accelerate aging and vascular damage. So that is sodium phosphate. You don't want that in your food. The next one is sodium bisulfate. And this one is really bad. It triggers intestinal inflammation. It is a combination of sulfuric acid and table salt. Think about that, sulfuric acid. That like burns holes in things, doesn't it? So both sodium bisulfate and sodium metabisulfate, which is one of the things that you also see in foods as an additive, are seriously bad news for your health. It damages reproductive organs and the central nervous system. It was actually banned on fresh foods. For a while, they used to spray that stuff on like things at a salad bar, and people were having terrible reactions. So it's no longer allowed to be on fresh foods, but it's still A-okay in processed foods. That doesn't make any sense, but there you go. You know, it's government agencies that are supposed to monitor our food just turning a blind eye to what they're allowing in our food. And a lot of the stuff that's in here is not allowed in other countries, especially European countries. They don't allow this stuff, at least at this point in time. So the last thing I want to mention is that very last line that I pointed out. I'm going to try again here, right here. See if I can get it close enough so that you can focus on it. I don't know if this camera's going to focus. But anyway, it says contains bioengineered food ingredients. So I could go on and on and on about the dangers of bioengineered, genetically modified ingredients in food. But instead, I'm going to put a link down in the description that you can follow. They talked to a group of doctors from the American Academy of Environmental Medicine. I used to be a part of that group, so I'm very familiar with what they do and their concerns about how contaminated our food chain has become. So I am going to put a link down below. It's cornucopia.org is the organization that interviewed these doctors. And so I will put that link down below and you can go and take a look for yourself. But bioengineered food, genetically modified food is very, very, very bad for your health. I personally experienced that when some genetically modified corn ended up in the food chain in 1995, 1996, somewhere around in there. I think it was like 1996. And it got into taco shells and that kind of thing. And I actually got poisoned from some taco shells. I won't say the brand name. They're still out there, and I'm sure they've taken care of the problem. But it was a long time ago, and so that food is no longer out there, that particular item. But what happened was I ended up with weird swelling in my ankles, and it was December, so it's not like the weather was hot or humid. It was December, and I got a lot of swelling in my ankles, and it was really kind of weird and concerning, you know, wondering what on earth is going on. But that was just the initial symptom. I later went on to develop full-blown fibromyalgia. And it wasn't until I figured out what caused it that I was able to get well again. And a lot has to do with what we are trying to fuel our bodies with. So I am going to leave it there. You now have one alternative to using boxed type ingredients that you are feeding yourself and your family. The rates of cancer are increasing, not decreasing, despite what government agencies are telling you. Autism is increasing at an alarming rate. Kids are having learning disabilities. There's a lot of people suffering because of what's being eaten. So I thank you for coming to visit my channel, Cook from the Past. And sorry I went on this rant, but it's something that people need to know about. You don't have to think that you have to eat this kind of food in order to be fed. You can create your own, and it's cheaper to eat what you prepare, and it's safer to eat, you know, nutritionally and from, you know, just a cellular standpoint. What you are asking your body to operate on makes a big difference in how you feel and how every day goes. So thanks for joining Cook from the Past. I am Catherine, and I will see you on the next video. Thank you.